In the previous video, we have established that your advisor is nuts and you should deal with him like a crazy person and you should maneuver around his crazy emotions. That's doable, annoying, but doable. But I got bad news for you. You are nuts too. And you should be aware that you're nuts and make sure that your emotional reactions to things don't damage you while you're doing your thesis. So what do I mean that you're nuts? I mean, you're a human being. You have emotions, and you should be aware that you have emotions. But particularly, doing a thesis is a stressful event. It is something where you're trying to do this thing that you've never done before. It's a very open-ended project, so you don't even know what you're supposed to be doing, and you're supposed to be learning that as you're going along and kind of inventing your own road as you're going. And it's something that's important to you and it's important to your career. And so, yeah, you're going to be stressed, right? And as you go through, you're going to have good times and bad times, and you're not going to know what you're doing. You're not going to know if you're making progress. It's going to feel like you're not making progress. And so you're going to be under stress. And when we're stressed, we tend to react more emotionally. Our emotions are closer to the surface than when we're calm, right? And sometimes your advisor is going to bring you bad news. Right? You're going to have the thing, you're going to be working for 3 weeks on this thing, and you're going to be doing it exactly the way your advisor told you to do it. You're going to come into the office meeting, and the advisor is going to take a look at that and say, no, that's all rubbish. You shouldn't have done it that way. That was just a dumb thing to do. Well, he told you to do this thing, right? Clearly, this is horrible. Right? You just wasted 3 weeks. It was a miserable experience. And it's all his fault, right? How can you not react emotionally to this? You're on a time limit. You're on a deadline. This thing has to be done in just 3 weeks. Got wasted. It was loads of work. It was loads of stress. All this dumb idiot's fault. Clearly, you're going to be upset. Like any human would be upset. And this is something that is almost certainly going to happen to you in this process. Like this doesn't always happen. A good 80% of the time it happens, right? And it happens because you're doing research. And as Einstein, well, everything gets attributed to Einstein, but as they say, Einstein said, if we knew what we were doing, we wouldn't call it research. There will be wrong roads. A good advisor will guide you down a wrong road. It can happen. You can't see where the road leads until you travel it. These things can and do happen. There will be mistakes. Some of them will be your fault. Some of them will be his fault. Doesn't matter. We're just trying to make progress here, right? But you're going to be upset. Like the guy told you to do this thing and you did it, and now that's all rubbish. But anyone would be upset. Anyone would be upset. And it is very, obviously you're going to be upset. It's very easy in circumstances like that to say what you're thinking, right? And what you're thinking is not good, and then you've burnt all kinds of bridges, right? The important thing here is to notice that there's two aspects to this. There's this one, you got led astray by this jerk. He didn't know where he was going until you got there, so there was a wrong road taken. That's fine, but it feels like a jerk. You got misled. Anyone's going to be upset with that. Anyone's going to be upset with him about that, rightly or wrongly, right? But you're going to be. And the second thing is to say, okay, that's the emotional reaction. What's the practical implications? The practical implications that we got to do things a different way. And it seems like we've lost in a practical manner, it feels like we've lost all that work, but in reality, you never did, right? The fact that you did it that way the first time, when you try to do it a different way, it'll be so much easier this time because you've learned things as you did it that way the first time. But that's not how you feel at the moment, right? How you feel at the moment is it's a complete waste. In fact, you've learned something. You've learned, first of all, that this way is not a good way to do it. That's knowledge. And secondly, you've learned a lot of little things in the process of doing that thing. And so you're actually in a better position than when you started, but it sure doesn't feel that way at all, right? And so you're going to be criticized by your advisor, sometimes for things that are your fault. You'll be upset about them too. Even if you could have done better, like nobody likes to be criticized, especially when it's important to them. And so you will be in your advisor's office and you will have negative emotional reactions to your advisor. Justified or unjustified, it actually doesn't matter. right? Because you don't want to burn bridges with this person. This is somebody who's important to you, whose opinion is important to you. You have to manage that. And so it is very important to realize that you are going to have emotional reactions to things. Some of them will be very negative emotions. And sometimes you need to call the guy out. Like, I did the thing you told me, but you shouldn't do it there. You should realize that your initial reaction is almost always going to be emotional. You should take some time and think about it. Say to the guy, you've made some interesting points. Let me take some time and think about it and get back to you tomorrow. That's perfectly reasonable. You're in a thinking business. Your job is to think. Taking time to think is exactly what you should be doing. So it's perfectly okay to say, let me think about it. Give yourself some space. Like before you say anything or address anything like that, anything where you have strong negative emotions, be aware that your emotions can make you do things that you really shouldn't, say things that you really shouldn't. Be aware that this is going to happen and be prepared to say, I'm going to force myself to take some space before I address this. And then you can think, what's the best way to go forward? How practical of an issue is it? Is it a big deal? Is it not a big deal? What you could say, how to say it diplomatically, but if you address it at the moment, you're going to be addressing it emotionally rather than rationally. And your job as an economist is to try to deal with the emotional stuff separately from the rational stuff and bring your rational professional self to your profession and, rant at your roommates as much as possible, like but try to separate those two out a little bit, and so you don't harm yourself in the process. So be aware that sometimes, almost certainly, you will have negative experiences with your advisor because they're trying to make you better, and so sometimes that means you're not saying you're not good enough yet, right? And so you will have a negative reaction to that. Be aware that those negative emotional reactions are coming, and be prepared to push them aside temporarily until you can deal with them separately from the actual rational issue that you're dealing with.